Hi, everyone. I want to thank you for joining us today for the Dreamers Soccer Clinic. We are going to be having a presentation today on financial aid and any kind of implications that has to do with this academic school year, including COVID-19, right? What's been going on with COVID-19 and how it affects financial aid. So my name is Luis Miranda, and I am on the board of the Dreamers Soccer Clinic. I have been with Panchito for about 2 years now, and Francisco is the founder and president of the Dreamers Soccer Clinic. So if there's anyone to thank after this, it's Francisco, because he's been organizing and getting people left and right. So my name is, again, Luis Miranda. Just to give you a little bit of my background, I was born in Huntington Park, and I lived in South Central until I was, I think, about 7 years old. I moved after the Rodney King riots from LA to Palmdale. And I grew up in Palmdale and went to Little Rock High School, and it's still part of LA County. Just a lot of people normally forget where LA County or where Palmdale's at, according to LA County. So it's closer to like Mojave area. So for the people joining us from out of state, we're kind of closer to the desert. So we're not really in the city as you hear about LA County. But yeah, so I grew up in Little Rock. I played soccer since I was about 6 years old. To sum things up, I didn't know anything about applying to financial aid or how to even apply to college. So I just went to a community college, played soccer there, got a soccer scholarship to go to New Mexico after I did my 2 years. It was a Division II because I didn't realize about my clock. Then after that, I had to come back. I lost my scholarship due to a health concern. But I was able to get compensated with NCAA, and I finished my bachelor's at Dominguez Hills. From Dominguez Hills, that's when I realized I wanted to become a student athlete counselor to give back to the student athletes so they could realize that it's important that just in case if athletics doesn't work out, you're able to pursue education, right? I went to Cal State Long Beach for my master's degree, and that's where I met my colleague, Alejandra Hurtado, that we'll talk shortly, just in another minute or so. I went to grad school there, that's at Cal State Long Beach. I started working at a community college at LA Harbor since 2013. In 2016, I was a counselor at Cypress College and El Camino. And then I did 1 year of adjunct. Then I've been working at OCC since 2017. And I'm going to be starting my 4th year this Monday. But will never ever forget my community. I will never forget where I came from. I'm always wanting to help out the Latinos, especially now in this day and age. It's very, very important for us to get educated. And most of the time it's just spreading awareness, right? We just need to know where to apply, how financial aid works, how to apply to the UC, CSUs, all that stuff. So I always want to give back to my community, even during a pandemic. So I'm going to stop there, and I'm just going to introduce my colleague. She's going to be giving her story. But before she does, I just want to give you guys a little bit of the rundown. After introductions, we are going to go into the PowerPoint. After the PowerPoint, if there is time, we're planning to do the Kahoot. After the Kahoot, we're planning to leave about 15-20 minutes for Q&A. And after the Q&A, there's also a survey that we would like everyone to fill out, because that helps us to continue doing these workshops. And we'll have Francisco talk about that again at the end of the workshop. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Alejandra.
Thank you, Luis. Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here. Such important information, but also it's Friday evening, and I know everybody's probably had busy weeks. My name is Alejandra Hurtado, and like Luis said, we met in grad school. Let's see, I grew up in Orange County, California. I lived in the IE, Paris, California for like 2 years. Not one city, because I come from a huge family. I'm number 7 out of 11 children that my mom had. So we had to move a lot. There was a lot of times that the landlords were like, you know what, I didn't realize you had all these chamacos laying around. So they're too loud, many reasons, but we really moved a lot. So that kind of had an effect on what schooling we had. Fortunately, in senior year, well, no, let me back up. We moved to Orange, the city of Orange in Orange County, my freshman year. of high school. So that gave me a little bit more stability where I could at least meet a counselor and, get to know my community. And so while I was there, I was able to find different resources. And that's one of the biggest things that I know for me, because I was able to connect to what we had is outreach. So the college has a team called Outreach that comes out to the high school and gives presentations during your senior year. That's what opened the door for me. And so if I can in any way spread the word, that's why I'm honored to be here, really, to be able to help. But in high school, I got pregnant and I became a teen mom. And one of the things that I know for a fact helped me was having sat through the outreach presentation, because I didn't know college was a possibility. And then when I got pregnant, most people just assume you're just gonna go away and that's it, your life is over, right? So that was hard because I was dismissed a lot. And I think that's what happens to La Comunidad a lot. We get dismissed, we get othered, we get set aside. And so when I found out I was pregnant, I knew that I had to do something not for beyond myself, right? Not just for myself. So luckily I did see that presentation and I went through the steps. And one of the biggest things was financial aid, right? I applied for financial aid and I qualified. I was able to go to Cal State Fullerton, but I didn't, in my head at that time, I didn't know how affordable it was. I still thought that there's no way I can afford this. I'm a single mom, there's just not gonna happen. So luckily, Santa Ana College, our local community college, came over and then they did a presentation, and so I signed up for them. I went into the community college, and then I was there, I got accepted to UCLA. I went to UCLA, but again, at this point, my son was almost 3 years old, and I was commuting. I didn't get dorms on campus. I didn't get anything. And again, it was just a lack of information because I didn't know to apply for housing, in May or June. I started asking, hey, where am I going to live when classes started, right? And it was a 2-hour drive every day that I had classes, and it was just impossible. At the same time, I was offered work study. So we'll talk a little bit about work study. It's work on campus. And I was very fortunate to find some mentors there that saw how hard I was willing to work. And so they offered me a full-time job. And so with my background being first generation, nobody in my family has gone to college, I thought, the dream is to get a steady job full-time with benefits, right? And they had union. So, that's what you hear, like, you can't get fired if you have union. They can't just be like, And so, of course, I took that job and I stopped going to UCLA. I was very fortunate that one of my friends that I met there, she actually had her master's degree in counseling, and she was doing financial aid for just a way to get into the community college to become a counselor. So she told me I can actually go back to school, because that was another myth that I thought. I thought you get one shot at college and you're done, right? And so since I had stopped out at UCLA, I thought that was my chance. I could never go back. So she clarified, I went back to Cal State Fullerton. And then when I was there, I graduated. That was in '07. And then I just started working full time, and I thought that was it. I proved everybody wrong. The teen mom was able to get her job and she could pay her bills, and she had good credit, those were the dreams. And then I got older, right? And I was working at the community college at that point in financial aid. And I realized, I want to do more than just financial aid. I want to be able to connect my financial aid knowledge with the academic side and help students navigate everything. I just felt like my hands were tied being in one department. So I went to Cal State Long Beach, and that's where I met Luis, and I got my master's in counseling. And I've been doing counseling for Santa Ana College, and then currently I'm at Saddleback College. And for me, it's just the best, because since then, I've gotten married, I have 2 younger ones, and for me, my dream is to be able to make as much money working part-time, and that's what I do, right? And so we all can make these dreams come true. We just need someone to guide us and show us oh, this is how you navigate the system. So I'm glad to be here. Thank you guys for coming.
Okay, Panchito, you could start the PowerPoint now. Thank you, Alejandra, for sharing that. As you could see, even though we come from two different communities, Orange County and LA, we still identify as being Latinos. And then we have unique stories, right? Mine has to do more with athletics, and then hers has to do, you know, like stories of resilience. That's what I would say that are in common, right? Everyone has unique challenges, and I'm sure you do too. And that's the good thing about education. There is no limit on how many times you could continue going to school, right? And that's the beautiful thing about community college, is that it opens up the doors for the students that didn't attend the 4 years, the UCs or the CSUs. You could keep trying, right? And that's how we are as Latinos. And I also wanted to talk a little bit, perdón, que no hablan español, para los papás o los hijos que están aquí que también hablan español. Si tienen alguna pregunta, también la pueden decir en español y voy a hacer lo mejor posible para traducir en español, y también Alejandra va a hacer lo mismo. Okay? So you can go to the next slide. So we want to give everyone just a reminder about Zoom. I'm sure you guys know this because we've been on the pandemic since March. So I just want to reiterate everything that make sure that your microphone is muted. If you needed to ask a question or something like that, please type it in the chat, as Evelyn will be texting me and letting me know about the questions. If not, we will give you a chance to unmute at the end of this seminar, and you'll be able to ask your questions, okay? If you would like to speak, please type in the chat box, or our moderator, same thing. For any questions that you may have throughout the session, we ask that you type them in the chat box, okay? All right, next slide. Okay, so to start off, right, this is just a broad spectrum. And before I continue, I want to say that with financial aid, everything changes, okay? Things change every single year. So it's very, very important that you start asking questions and being inquisitive to your financial aid department at whatever institution that you're at, whether if it's out of state, a 4-year for a UC or CSU, a private school or community college. It's very important to start asking them questions. You could email them, right? You could always look on Google and look at your university and put financial aid department. And then I'm sure there's going to be even an email or a phone number you could contact to ask them these questions, right? So what is financial aid? It's a grant or scholarship, loan, or paid employment offered to help a student meet or her college's expenses, right? We always want to see, can we pay for college? We know the tuition goes up, or the tuition can for some reason, we could pay half of it, or sometimes some students get everything paid for, right? So we always ask ourselves, so what is this person doing different? Why do they get financial aid and I don't? Why do they get more money than I do, right? So it's all case by case. This is very, very important to know from the beginning. As we continue with this PowerPoint, everything is case by case because everyone has unique scenarios. Like Alejandra just said, she was a teen mom. So obviously there's gonna be financial aid for that, right? And then I identify myself as a student athlete. So there's scholarships for that. So scholarship is one of the things I wanted to touch upon, because even though you're a student athlete and they offer you a scholarship, it's very important to ask these questions, because what I found out is that they only offered me money while I was a student athlete. If I was no longer a student athlete, they were not gonna cover my tuition. So let's say, for example, I wanted to be an engineer, and that's gonna take me 6 years to get a bachelor's, but my athletic career ends in 4 years. That means in those 2 years, I had to pay out of pocket. And that catches students off guard like it did me. I was like, whoa, I thought I was on scholarship. And they're like, correct, while you're a student athlete. So it's very important that when you get scholarships, that you read the fine lines, ask questions, because there's criterias for all of these. There's criterias for financial aid, for grants, for scholarships, for student loans, and even work study, right? You have to meet a specific eligibility criteria for all of these aid, right? So it's very, very important. So there's grants, there's scholarships, student loans, and work study. And as you can see, grants, you normally don't have to pay back. But this is the thing. I've also seen that grants can be stopped if you discontinue school, if you don't meet a certain GPA. So let's say, for example, you get like $7,000 in grants. And that first semester, they split it in half, you get $3,500. If you don't meet the criteria, they could hold that grant and not give it to you the second semester. Doesn't mean you have to pay the $3,500 back, But that next semester, you're not going to be able to receive those funds. So it's very, very important to always ask your financial aid department on how any of these will help me, right? How does grants help me? How does scholarships? Can I read what I'm signing for the student loans, for the work study, for the grants? Because there's a clock behind work study, okay? Go to the next slide. The other thing I didn't say is for all of these, you have to apply, right? You have to apply. Go back one. I think, did you miss one? Yeah, right there. So you have to always apply. That one right there, right there. I think that one's it. Yeah, right there. You always want to apply to FAFSA. Doesn't matter. It doesn't even matter if you get a scholarship as an athlete. You still have to apply for FAFSA. I still had to apply to FAFSA when I was at the community college or in New Mexico. And even when I came back, they always kept telling me I have to apply each year. I know it gets annoying, but you'll notice that the more you do it each year, by the time you're in your senior year, you're an expert. You just go in there, it takes you 5-10 minutes, click, 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 and then you keep moving forward, okay? As we progress, there'll be a link, and Alejandro will talk about what it looks like and what's the link to apply for the different types of financial aid.
So this screen, I just want to point out, the first grant is the BOG waiver. That's a California grant, but ask your financial aid in your state what kind of tuition grants you have. So it might not be called the Promise Grant or BOG waiver is what it used to be called. It could be called something else. I've heard students from Arkansas that as long as they graduate with a 2.0 from their high school, their college tuition is paid for. So each state has different tuition funding. So ask about that. The Pell Grant, that second one, that's a universal grant. So when you hear Pell Grant, that's across the board, all United States. You'll be able to see if you qualify for that. The next one down, the Cal Grant, again, that's state-based, that's California grant. So those of you in California can ask about that grant. Again, out of state, make sure you ask about your state grants versus your state in-state tuition waivers. And then the SCOG is another federal grant. So that the Pell and SCOG, those are federal. Anybody across the states can look for those.
Next slide. Did you want to take this one, Alejandra? Or?
Sure. So if you could just go back one screen. One of the other things where you see the bottom, it says satisfactory academic progress. So in order to keep all these grants, all you have to do is pass the classes with a C or better and complete at least 67. So you could say 70% of the units that you attempt. So they give you a leeway to, you might drop a class or not pass a class, but they give you one semester, right? They're not going to allow that to happen semester after semester. So what you don't want to do is have that happen 2 semesters in a row where you don't complete a class or at least 70% of your units or fall below 2.0. Just quick disclaimer there. Go ahead, go next. And again, the difference between state aid versus federal aid. So on the left, you have the state aid for California, right? We have the fee waiver, which is the Promise Grant, formerly known as the BOG. Again, these are grants that every state, you might have it, it's just called something else, right? So make sure you ask. We have the Cal Grant here in California. For foster youth, we have what's called Chafee, California National Guard. All of these are all grants. You don't have to pay back anything that you qualify for, right? Because you fill out the FAFSA, that qualifies for everything. On the right, you have the federal aid. So these are every state across the United States would have federal Pell Grant, SCOG, the federal work study program as well. So you can work on campus. And then the federal subsidized and unsubsidized loans. There's actually 2 different kinds of loans available. So when you are given your award letter, you want to look over and look for these names, right? Because you'll have an itemized award letter, and it should say that you're getting $6,000 from Pell Grant, $4,000 from federal work study, and then another $5,000 federal student loans. They used to in the past give you an award letter that just said your total package is $20,000, but they didn't itemize. It didn't say specifically what funding you were getting it from. Now they're required to. So your institution should be giving you an itemized award letter. The award letter will tell you exactly where you're getting that funding from. And if you see loans, just be mindful that there's 2 kinds of federal loans. The subsidized, so you see the word there, subsidized, that means the government will pay the interest rate on that loan while you're enrolled in school, at least 6 units or more, so at least half time. And then 6 months after you graduate high school. The unsubsidized, so if you get offered an unsubsidized loan, the interest is accruing and you will have to pay it. You can pay for it while you're in school or 6 months after you graduate school, but the interest is still there and it's accruing. So you could have borrowed $4,000 and by the end of your bachelor's degree, you could owe $7,000, right? It's just depending what that interest rate is at because it accumulates. So even the interest earns interest. So it's really important that you're aware of that. Next slide.
Okay, Alejandra, I wanted to stop. I had a question. So I had a student that says, when and how do students apply for these grants?
So I think we have a slide for that, but when October 1st of every year. So if you are going into this school year for for fall 2020, you should have applied last October 1st. So you can still apply. And then we have a slide that'll show you exactly where to apply in a minute. We have a screenshot. So similar to the other state aid, I wanted to shout out our UC system. We have UC Blue and Gold. So again, in your state, ask for your tuition assistance for your state. But this is for the UCs where if your family makes under $80,000 a year, so one of the things I remember, one of the questions was, what's the criteria, right? What's the FAFSA going to ask for? It asks for your social, your parents' social, and if they don't have a social, that doesn't make you ineligible. But it's going to ask for income from last year. So it's called prior years. So if you're filling it out this year, 2020, it's asking for 2018 taxes, right? So if you put that your family has $80,000 a year or less, you qualify for free tuition at the UCs. So that's super important because we weren't having a lot of students going to the UCs because of the cost. So they've implemented this Blue and Gold. How to apply? So here's the question, Luis. Everybody's going to fill out either the FAFSA form or the DREAM Act form. How do you know which one you qualify for? If you're in California, it's the California DREAM Act application. So that's, again, another state aid. If you're out of state, make sure you contact your financial aid office. And if you're in high school now, you can still call up your local university financial aid office and ask those questions. So if they're not coming to you, to your high school virtually, you know, you're more than welcome to call them up because every school has a financial aid office and can help answer those questions. Also look at their websites. A lot of them are, you know, putting that information on there. But the FAFSA application, and then for California students, it's the FAFSA with the Cal Grant GPA verification form. So that form will verify your GPA because the Cal Grant is based on at least graduating high school with a 2.0, or if you're transferring, it's a competitive grant. But that needs to be done by March 2nd. And the reason they do that is because it's priority grant. So the Cal Grant, there's a limited pot. The FAFSA, it's unlimited. It's a federal grant. So you can apply anytime from October 1st all the way through June 30th of that school year.
Alejandra, so I have another question. Can a student apply to the Blue and Gold even if they're not sure if they're going to attend a UC?
Absolutely, because it's all done through the same FAFSA. You're going to have to apply for. If you're going private, out of state, in-state, community college, it's the same universal FAFSA form or DREAM Act application. So yes, the school will actually see if you qualify. So this is just the notice for the Dreamers for this school year coming up, 2020-2021. There was some Trump administration tried to, you know, do the whole taking away of the DACA for students. And so this is the school system as a whole in California saying that we're still going to be able to support you guys. So don't let that political process keep you from applying. Make sure you're still applying, and you complete the application. There's a website, dream.csag.ca.gov. And then we also wanted to see, let you know that there's a DACA renewal scholarship. So if you need to renew your DACA, it's lc4daca.org, and those are scholarships because we know that costs money. So that was just. Oops. Luis, I think you're up with the CARES.
Yeah, right there. Okay. So yeah, I just want to reiterate too about the contacting your financial aid department. I've noticed this because I went to so many different institutions, from community college, out-of-state private, CSUs. Every financial aid department is very, very busy. Okay, so do not lose hope if you call and they do not pick up. You have to be persistent. That means maybe shoot them an email once a week. You know, go, like Alejandra said, go online, go to their website, see if you can email the counselors, how you could schedule an appointment to meet with a financial aid counselor, right? Specifically in that department. Because at every financial aid, I had to go almost every semester and ask questions. And one of the biggest things I always had to say is, when am I going to get my money? People always want to know that. So contact your financial aid department, because each school will give their disbursements differently, right? Some of them might give them early, some might give them late. So it's important that you ask those questions to the financial aid department.
And if I can add, Luis, another thing where the student can control that timeline, fill out those applications October 1st. Don't let it get past October 3rd, because in the financial aid department, we screen them as they come in, first come, first serve, right? So get in that application October 1st. If you wait October 15th, it's not, detrimental. It's not the end of the world. But if you wait till December, well, then your money's going to be lagging 2 months behind, right? So if you can apply in October, apply in October. And then keep track of the email that you're putting on there and your school's email, because the financial aid office, a lot of times, for me at least, every year, I was flagged. I needed to prove how poor I was, right? I needed to prove to them that my taxes were accurate. So I needed to either bring them in or sign a form saying, yes, I really am poor, because they didn't believe me, or because they said it's a federal policy. So that's another, like you said, don't give up. It's the bureaucracy sometimes, but it's worth it. It is your money. You are, entitled to that money. So the unfortunate part is just you having to stay on top of it. But where you can control it is turn in the forms that they ask you for right away. And one of the things that you'll know is you'll need 2018 tax forms. So have those ready, right, when you're applying, and then apply October 1st.
Yeah, thank you, Alejandra. So yes, as you guys both may know, Alejandra knows a little bit more about this than I do. I'm the student athlete counselor. So she's always going to be helping me out and correcting me if I don't say anything. But there was one more question. It says, if a student is already at the UC now, can they not apply for these grants anymore? Or can they reapply for the next year?
Oh, absolutely. You can always apply. So the application period stays open for UCs, especially because that's October 1st through June 30th. So if you attended in the summer, your application closed June 30th, right? So you can't go retro for that. But coming up, October 1st, you should have already applied, right? So it's always open rolling if you do the FAFSA. If you happen to qualify for the DREAM Act application, that has a March 2nd deadline and October 1st opening date. So it just depends which one you're looking to apply for, but you can always get it retro even for the DREAM Act, as long as you apply within those timeframes.
Thank you, Alejandra. So so the CARES, right? So this actually just got passed because of the pandemic. So it kind of went all over the US, right? So the way they disperse it is going to be differently depending on the UC, the CSU, and the community college level, and even private institutions in California. So this is kind of like the generic eligibility for the CARES emergency funding. You want to also check with your institution, because I know every institution has a certain amount of funding, right? But you want to check how much money they have, if they've already spent it, and what other criteria that they want you to meet in order to apply for this. And this CARES emergency funding was made for the transition from in-person to remote learning, because a lot of students had to drop out of CSUs and UCs because they had to move back home and they couldn't deal with the remote learning. They couldn't have access to laptops. They weren't able to obviously contact a professor as much as they would. Just so many different obstacles that happen in this whole transition. And I'm sure some of you already know some professors at my institution had to cancel some courses because the professors were having difficulty transitioning their lab courses to online, right? And they had to create something that was called an emergency withdrawal. And this is very important because how I said in the beginning with financial aid, there is eligibility that you have to meet with financial aid. You have to sometimes be enrolled full time. Sometimes you can't drop some courses. So this is something else that was to use to support students, right? But you want to contact your institution because for each student, they could disperse, like at the community college level, they could give students maybe $300-400, depending on their needs. At the UCs, it could be a little bit more. Obviously, because the UCs is more expensive, the tuition is higher, the cost of living, right? So this is just the generic eligibility. You have to be a US citizen or eligible for a non-citizen. So what that also means is you could also be part of the DREAM Act, but you want to ask your department, okay, you know what, I was in this situation, do I still qualify? How much money do I get? And you have to complete the FAFSA. And this goes again, always complete the FAFSA every year, like Alejandra says. I'm going to keep saying that, October 1st, all the way through March 2nd. And you want to jump on it early, right? You want to jump on this application early, and it's online. And you want to do this as soon as possible, okay? So you don't have to worry about it in the future. You obviously, for the males, you have to register for the selective service. I would have questions about this too. This does not mean you are going to go to war, okay? That does not mean they're going to recruit you tomorrow. They're going to come to your house and they're going to recruit you, okay? It's just something that all the males have to do. And please also talk to your parents. Talk to your parents about, I know some students say, well, my dad doesn't have taxes. You know, he may get paid under the table or whatever. Do not be afraid of that. There's things to work around that. And what do you have to do? You want to talk to your financial aid counselor, because when it comes to situations like that, it becomes a case-by-case basis. So that means the financial aid counselor is going to interview you based on your situation, and they're going to know what forms you need to fill out. So then that way you could get the financial aid that you need, okay?
And a side note, Luis, if I can add, sometimes while I was working in the financial aid office, students or parents were afraid to tell us that because, you know, we're a government entity, but we don't speak to the IRS. We get the information from the IRS. So on the FAFSA or the DREAM Act, it asks you, can we link to the IRS to get those taxes? But if you or your parents most likely haven't applied for taxes or owed taxes, and you give us that information, we don't then go and report it to the IRS. So just so you guys can be comforted by that.
Thank you, Alejandra. Thank you for bringing that up. So I had two questions. One of them says, is the CARES emergency funding a grant? So this is a grant. This is an emergency funding. You don't have to pay this back. This is something that's just given for students at this time because of the transition. So don't worry about paying the CARES Act back. And the other one is, can we apply earlier than October 1st? Correct me if I'm wrong, Alejandra. I don't think so, but maybe they can apply. I'm not sure.
No, you can't apply, but the October that's coming up now is actually not for this fall. It is for fall 2021. So you're always applying 1 year ahead. So if you haven't applied for the fall coming up, right, you can still apply. You're just going to wait a little bit longer to get your money because now you're applying really close to the start of the semester. But stay on top of it. You can still qualify.
Thank you. Yeah. And then you can see at the bottom there that CARES is a federal emergency grant. So it's a grant. Remember, if we said grant funding, you don't have to pay that back. And for some of you, if you have your cell phone, like I always tell my students in my classroom, if you see a slide that benefits you, just take a quick screenshot with your cell phone. Use it to your advantage, and then you could always look at it as a photo later on and say, hey, what did they say about this? And then you could bring it up to your counselor and say, hey, I attended this seminar. Can you give me more information on how this could help me out? Okay, so use it to your advantage. Okay, you can go to the next slide.
So one of the things that the FAFSA application does is it asks a lot of questions. I'm not gonna lie. So if it's the first time you're filling it out, you're gonna be, you might feel like it's asking for a lot, but it's also gonna qualify you for a lot. So the reason why there's so many questions is because it's trying to figure out all the questions possible for all the grants that are available. Because if you answer, like for me, for one of the questions that it would ask is, do I support anybody, right? And at that time I did, I had my son. So I would say, yes, I have a child. So that puts me in a separate category than a student coming in saying, no, I don't have a child, right? So that's why it's asking all those questions. It is a little bit nosy, But a lot of times the parents, right? The parents don't like sharing that information. And just a little side note for me, my mom didn't want to give me the taxes, so I had to sneak them away. I'm not saying you guys should. I'm just saying that I understand the fear behind sharing information, right? But by completing this application, you're qualifying for up to like $10,000 of grants alone. So again, get it in early. This slide speaks specifically to being a dependent versus an independent student. So it's a little bit different for the FAFSA than it is for, let's say, your legal age of 18, right? To be an independent student, you have to be at least one of these bullet points. So born before 96, which means you're over 24. You have to be married, have a child that you support, have another dependent that you support. So sometimes what I saw in the financial aid office is there was a student, but the student was actually the one supporting the parent, right? Because the parent didn't have a social and the parent didn't work. So the student actually worked and support the parent. That student would then become independent versus dependent. If they're a ward of the court, if they're an active military, or they're a veteran, or if they're homeless or at risk of being homeless. So any one of those, if you answer one yes to that, it makes you independent. What does that mean? That means that your financial information is going to be looked at on the FAFSA or DREAM Act and not your parents, right? If you cannot answer yes to any one of those, that means both your financial information and your parent or guardian's financial information will be looked at. So dependent all the way up until you're 24, or you can say yes to any one of these, your parents will be required to show their taxes and sign on the FAFSA as well. Next slide. So one of the biggest things that trips students up is this FSA ID. What this is your legal signature. So it's a PIN number that you create. And again, it asks for a couple questions, security things to make sure that you say you are who you are when you're signing it. Take a screenshot of this, because if you notice, it's at the bottom, it's fsaid.ed.gov. That's where you're certifying who you are to create an electronic signature for yourself. And if you're dependent, if you cannot say yes to one of the previous questions, you'll need to create one of these for you and create another one for a parent. It's going to ask for separate emails. So if your parent doesn't have an email, you're gonna have to create an email address for that parent to tie it to this FSA ID, okay? And when you're creating this, make sure you keep track of the secret questions and you write down your FSA ID number separately, because we don't have access to that on campus. Nobody on campus. So if you lose it, you have to deal with either online or call FSA ID, and that's a remote service, right? So keep track of that. Keep it safe. Don't share it with the offices because we don't need it on campus. That's just for your purposes. You will need a social security number for the FSA ID. And then the other question is, do parents need a social? So no, parents do not need a social. When you're filling out the FAFSA, it asks for a parent social. If you don't have one or parents don't feel comfortable sharing, type in zeros. So it's 3, 6, 7, 8 zeros across the board for their social, and it'll go through. But when you do that and they don't have an FSA ID, then they can't qualify to get the FSA ID, because the FSA ID is tied to a social to verify that it's one person. So for that parent, you actually need to print out a signature page, okay? And it'll tell you at the end of the FAFSA or the DREAM Act application, do you have an FSA ID or do you want to print out a signature page? If you're printing out the signature page because you could not get an FSA ID, that's just good. But you want to make sure you print it, sign it, and mail it as soon as possible, because that application does not become valid unless they receive those signatures. Okay, so that's really important. Any questions there, Luis?
No, I haven't gotten one.
Okay, next, Panchito.
So there was a question that says, if my sister already made an FSA ID for my mom, would it be the same ID for when I apply?
Yes, that's a great question. Yes, one parent can sign for multiple children, but your sister will have her own FSA ID and you will have yours. Okay, so continuing the FSA ID, who creates it? One for the student and one for at least one parent if you're dependent. And then you can print out the signature page. So I kind of said that. Keep record of your username and password and your FSA ID, because again, we can't get those on campus. And it's a little bit vague, but you're gonna see it says federal student aid when you're applying for that FSA ID, okay? There's tabs on there. One says log in, the other one says create an FSA ID. So those are the screenshot is what you'll see.
I got a question that says, it says, can you use a TIN, a TIN number for the social security number?
So not on the FAFSA or the DREAM Act. Well, actually on the DREAM Act you can, on the FAFSA you cannot. On the FAFSA they prefer that you put in zeros. On the DREAM Act you can put in the TIN number. Great question. Next slide.
You want me? Yeah, I'll go with it. So these are the main links for the financial aid. So please take a screenshot of this. It's www.fafsa.ed.gov. And then there's the DREAM Act application. Browse through it, go through it. What I always tell my students that are trying to transfer, applying, I always say, just go on there yourself and start exploring, start reading. That's the best thing you can do. Go to fafsa.ed, always create an application. If you don't feel comfortable, don't submit anything, but you're always able to create an application, right? And then you could always save. That's very, very important. What I tell my students, always save. Did you want to say something, Alejandra? Go ahead.
I just wanted to mention, realize that these are .gov, not .com. So sometimes we automatically put in .com at the end. We have some people that have created .coms for FAFSA and DREAM Act, and then at the end it'll charge you. These are free applications. You should never have to pay to submit these applications or to get assistance to complete these applications. There's assistance virtually now at every campus to complete these applications as well, and it's free. So I just wanted to make sure we put that out there. They're free forms.
And I wanted to say, please check your email, your school's email. It's very, very important, especially now that we move to remote learning. They're going to be sending you any kind of information, transition, because everything is kind of fluid. Things are changing. So what I always recommend students is have your school email on an app. A lot of schools have an app. So then that way you could just check your app, go in there and see if there's any emails on financial aid, on adding or dropping courses, because in my institution, they give you 24 hours to add a class. Waitlist. If you don't add class, that could determine if you qualify for aid for the grant or for financial aid. So always check your emails. I would say probably check it maybe 2 to 3 times a week, especially now that everything's remote learning, okay? Did you want to add anything else on this slide, Alejandra?
No, just, remember October 1st, you're applying for next year. If you haven't applied for this year, it's still open for the federal grants. March 2nd deadline did pass for students for this year. But if you're a community college student, there's always opportunity to get that Cal grant as a transfer student as well.
I know we're going very low on time. We weren't expecting this, but it said one more question. Would creating an FSA ID, the virtual signature, be easier than printing out the paper and signing it?
Yes, because as soon as you create that FSA ID, when you're completing the FAFSA or the DREAM Act, you type it in, you submit it, and then it's off and it's authorized and it's ready to process. If you create the signature page, or you have print out the signature page, I should say, it goes, you submit it, but they don't process until they receive that physical signature page, because in essence, it's not a valid application because it's not signed. So if you have a social and you are doing it ahead of time, do the FSA ID, it just makes it a lot easier.
Thank you.
These were the websites that I was going to show you so that you're sure that you're going to the correct website, just as a visual. So the one on the left is for the FAFSA, the federal form, right? That applies to everybody. One on the right is for the DREAM Act application. So students, if you're an AB 540 or you are part of DACA, then you would be looking for the one on the right, and everybody completes the FAFSA. If so, it's one or the other. That's the other thing. Sometimes students think they have to complete both, and it's one or the other. They're free applications, so again, never pay for these forms. These are just some scholarship links that I wanted to put up for everybody. They've been verified, and we had students, at least from my institution at Saddleback, say that these are good websites and they're valid websites. So this is another one where you would take the screenshot and make sure you keep that information.
Yeah, I also wanted to add, when applying to scholarships, because I had this, there's so many scholarships out there, so many. But you need to find out if you meet that criteria for the scholarship. There's even Maldev, that's for Latinos. You could go on that website. You could just Google now. The good thing about the internet is AB 540 scholarships. I believe when Mana came over here last year, all their concerts that they had in LA, all the money that they got from their fans, they donated it and created a scholarship for the Dreamers. Obviously that money's gone because that was last year, but you're able to Google that, right? You can Google scholarships. There's scholarships for people that write with their left hand. There's scholarships for single moms. There's scholarships for being a first-gen Latino. There's so many. So these are just some links that Alejandra provided that will definitely help you out. But you could even go to your foundation office, well, at least at my institution, it's called the foundation office. And there's a list of scholarships that your institution will have. And you just have to do, like the hard work and see which one you actually meet. Because there could be scholarships for women, there could be scholarships for men, there could be scholarships for athletes, there could be scholarships for just any population that fits that criteria. So make sure that you ask questions to your financial aid department. Do we have a foundation office? Or do you guys have a link that kind of sums up all the scholarships together that I could browse? Because some of them are gonna need letters of recommendation. Others could ask for proof of income, that if you work or don't work. There's some that might ask for, showing that you have given back to the community, that you have given like a community service. So it's important that you read these scholarship guidelines, because we're just kind of giving you a broad spectrum, but it's important that you read these guidelines, because I always have students tell me, why did they receive aid and I didn't? Because everyone's going to be different on their need, right? Did you want to add anything else, Alejandra?
No, just I would always just say make sure you start with the FAFSA, because that's the one that's for sure in the bucket, right? And then do your research for any scholarships or grants that your university would offer. Do you have any more questions?
I haven't received any, but I know there's 12 minutes left, so I think we're just going to move straight to the Q&A. So okay. If you guys want to ask questions.
One thing can I just say, because sometimes I had students get caught up in this. So when you're filling out the FAFSA, it asks how much do you have in your savings or banking account. It'll ask that question for you, and it'll ask that question for your parent. A lot of the times when you're filling out the application, because it's October 1st, right, and rent due, your parents will have their rent in their bank account, but that's not like savings, right? So pay the rent and then put in what's left after you pay the rent, right? Because that actually will tilt us one together. I saw that happen a lot, where the rent was sitting there, so they had, I don't know, $2,400 and rent was $2,200. So that actually tipped the scales a little bit against the students' grants, right? So that's one little caveat that I just wanted to throw out there, that sometimes parents have the money in there that's not really there. It's just waiting for that check to get cashed or to go get that money order for rent, because it's October 1st. And sometimes, we get caught up in that stuff. So little things.
I have a question here. It says, what scholarships should we apply for if we're not low income?
So again, that would go back to the research, and you would still do the FAFSA, because the institutions have their own scholarships and their own criteria. They still want to know your baseline. So everybody uses the FAFSA or the DREAM Act as a calculator for them, because what it does is, one of the questions was, how do you know what you qualify for in the Google Doc, right? At the end of both applications, you're going to get what's called an EFC number, the expected family contribution, EFC. The closer that is to 0, the more you qualify for. But just because it's not 0 doesn't mean you don't qualify. There's a sliding scale. You can qualify for the max, which is like $6,500 federal Pell Grant, or you can qualify for $100, right? So if your family is not closer to that 0, that's okay. Apply, and then they'll tell you how much you qualify for, because it's not yes, you qualify, or no, you don't. It's not black or white. It's more of a sliding scale. You can qualify for a lot, or you can qualify for a little.
Okay, so I had another question here. I think I could answer this, but Alejandra could always have my back. So it says, is FAFSA and DREAMAC the same thing, and what is the difference? So for FAFSA, it's for students that were born here, right? And then the Dreamers are sometimes identified as AB 540 students, and they were early childhood arrivals. That means they probably got here at the age of 1 or 2. And I know there's a criteria of high school that they have to attend. Is it like 3 years of high school, Alejandra, to considered as a Dreamer? And then you apply to this, and they normally give you a social security, but there's like a digit in front of it, right? There's like a
they all start with a 9.
Yeah. So that's the difference. So the Dreamers normally know because they've gone through that process and they've gotten that social security. And there's an application for them.
And you have to have applied for AB 540. So yeah.
Yeah, correct. So that's the difference between those two. And there's another.
But just really quick, you said students that were born here. You could have been born elsewhere and then naturalized, right?
Yes,
so if you
correct.
took so you could be a U.S. citizen, or you can have that alien registration number. So you don't have to be. You could be an eligible non-citizen and not be part of DREAM Act and still do the FAFSA. So if you have that green card, right? That's what it was called before, green card, the alien registration number. Do the FAFSA. You're not DACA because you're not AB 540. AB 540 specifically, like you said, 3 years of high school and graduate from a California high school.
And then another one says, so if we are a senior and we're going to be attending college in the fall of 2021, would we use our 2018 or 2019 tax return?
Okay, so you're a senior now. This is your senior year. You're going to be applying October 1st for the FAFSA that is opening up 2021, 2022. So you're using 2019 taxes.
Yeah, good, very good. Thank you. Honestly, you guys have no idea how good Alejandra is because these questions are coming in, but she's very, very knowledgeable. And I know we're always lifelong learners, right? Things are changing consistently. But so let me go to the next one. It says on the FAFSA page, it says the parent can use a save key instead of FSA ID. So do they still have to create their own FSA ID?
When you're creating the FSA ID, that's one of the questions that I'll ask you. Would you like to create a save key? So it's all one and the same. It's just different ways of signing. So you can use either one.
All right. And the next one says, is FSA required when applying for financial aid?
Is the FSA ID required?
That's what I'm assuming. That's what I'm assuming. Yeah.
Okay. So the FSA ID is another way to sign the application. It's basically your electronic signature. It's not required. There's 2 ways to sign it, but it has to be signed. You can either create that FSA ID, so now you have an electronic signature that's unique to you or to one of your parents, or you print out the signature page, physically sign a piece of paper, put it in the mail. You have to write the address on there, put a stamp on it, and mail it off, right? For that to actually be a signature and a valid application.
Okay, so.
Sorry, go ahead. It's just one or the other.
Okay. Is that it for that question?
Yeah.
Okay, so I have another student. I just got a text message saying that they want to speak. So go ahead, unmute yourself, Tatiana, if you wanted to ask a question.
Hi, yes. First of all, thank you guys for all the information that you guys are giving us. And my question is, if I'm already enrolled, I already turned in my financial aid, but I didn't know that you can get grants if you were in foster care, and I put no on my financial aid, how would I even be able to go back to my financial aid and change that?
Great question. Yes. So you can always change your application. What you're going to do is you're going to update it. But then you're also going to follow up on that, because what happens is at the financial aid office, we receive reports. So it's going to say Tatiana applied, here's her first report, and then a second one is going to get pushed. We won't review that second one until we see it, right? So it's to your best interest to contact the financial aid office and tell them you've updated, so they can kind of flag your application and look at the most recent. But also remember, it's called the So are you in California?
Yeah, I'm in California.
Okay, it's called the Chafee grant. So there's 2 things you're going to do. You're going to also contact, what school are you going to?
The University of Antelope Valley.
Okay, so contact that school and ask for the Chafee or foster youth liaison. Somebody on that campus takes care of specifically that, And then the second part, so there's two parts to that. The second part is you need to contact your previous social worker, right? The very last one that you had, they have to submit something on the back end to kind of verify that what you're saying is true, and so you can qualify for that aid. Okay, so a couple of steps, but it's totally worth it because you get aid all the way up until you're 24.
Got it. And then just my second question, if this is my last semester to graduate and I haven't applied for any grants, would that be too late to get that funding?
No, because you can get it retro, but retro up until this semester, right? Because we closed out, the June 30th was the closing out of last school year. So you can still qualify at least for this semester. After this semester, you're gonna get your bachelor's?
Yes.
Okay, so at least for this semester, you can qualify. And then even if you're gonna go to grad school, it'll be the same FAFSA application. So just FYI, because they all use that to see what you qualify for.
Got it. Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I wanted to say, because I know we have a few minutes left, and I know the questions are coming in. So the next one is Selena. Okay, so we're gonna stay on here probably a couple more minutes, but don't be offended if I have to stop you because eventually we have to fill out a survey. But okay, so just giving everyone a heads up. But Selena is next. Go ahead and speak.
Okay, hi guys. My question is, like, what if my legal guardian is retired? Cause like I'm adopted and like she's retired and like she's been retired for like 2 years now. So like, do I still have taxes? Like we're on like Social Security. So, like I don't know what to do.
Right. So it would depend. Does your legal guardian file taxes? Do they file taxes? If they do, then yes, right? You answer the questions just like everybody else. If they don't, you are going to put on there. It's going to ask you, do your parents or legal guardians file taxes? You're going to say no. And then that is actually one of the questions that comes up later on. It asks, do you or do your parents receive or legal guardians receive SSI, disability, TANF, which is food stamps? Don't be afraid to put yes if you qualify for those, because you might be like, I don't want to tell these people that my parents get food stamps, but you're disqualifying yourself for potential aid. So yeah, if your parents are retired and they're on social, then put that on there, because that's actually going to be a factor, believe it or not. It's going to help you in the calculation of how much aid you get, because they understand, well, your legal guardian is retired, so there's no room to increase that income, right? They're on a stable, steady, fixed income, right? It's what it's called. So that will actually go into the calculation of what aid you're going to qualify for, versus someone like I said, I was a teen mom, right? So when my son applies, they have to put my age. They're thinking, this girl, she can still have a lot of years to work, right? So we're not going to give her that same benefit of the doubt that they give someone who's a parent who's retired, or a legal guardian that's retired.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So the next one in line is Julian. Go ahead, ask your question, Julian.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for your time and holding this presentation together. My question is more focused on unsubsidized loans. Like, ideally, you wouldn't want to take out any loans. Like, I know they're bad, but I know currently, like right now, like because of the pandemic, a lot of interest rates are low. So I was wondering if it would be more strategic to take an unsubsidized loan this semester than take one next semester. And to follow up on that, I'm wondering that if I take a loan out for, let's say, 2%, if like next year it turns into like 3 or 4%, like can interest rates increase over time?
They do. So that's a great question, Julian. I like how you're thinking, already strategizing. I love it. So yes, the interest rates are fixed for now, but it'll change up until you graduate, or you, what they call it is consolidate your loans. So your subsidized loans, the government, and this is another thing, you have to qualify for that loan, right? So the FAFSA will qualify you for subsidized or unsubsidized. If you qualify for the subsidized, the government is paying for that interest. So whether it's 0%, 2%, or like it's been some years 5%, it's not going to phase your loan amount because the government is paying it. It's not accruing. It'll start accruing once you drop below halftime or you graduate out of high school. You graduate out of college 6 months after you graduate. At that point is when you're hoping that the interest rates are low at that point, because that's when it's you have the ability to lock that interest rate. Does that make sense? Did I answer the question?
And is that only for subsidized? So unsubsidized, the interest comes while you're in college?
Correct. And it's accruing. So in that instance, if you would only take the unsubsidized if you did not qualify for subsidized. So if you don't qualify, or the amount that you qualify for subsidized is not enough, because there's also a limit to that, and you need additional loans on top, then you go to the unsubsidized. And that's where the interest rate would help you, because it's low now. So you, even though it's accruing, it's like nothing, right? But then again, once it jumps as well.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, great question.
Okay, thank you, everybody. I did want to say, because that's going to be our last question, but before everybody leaves, okay, I have to say this, it's very important. If you like this workshop and you want us to maybe do one in the future next year, and if Alejandra wants to come back and help us out or extend it, please, I want to transition it over to Panchito, because he's going to talk about that survey. That's going to help us determine if you found this useful or not, okay? So thank you again, Alejandra. I appreciate everyone attending, but I'm going to transition it over to Panchito.
Hello, everyone. So before you all leave, please fill out the survey. Once you fill it out, then of that, we are going to conclude with some final questions and things that we want to go over. But pretty much use your phone and take a picture of what's in front of you, in the screen, and then that survey is gonna pop up. So please fill it out, and once you complete it, just go ahead and on the chat section, say complete. And once everyone completes it, we're gonna go ahead and wrap things up, okay?
So go ahead and take a couple minutes to do that now, right?
Correct.
Yes.
Also, if the QR code is not working by any chance, there is a link posted in the chat that you guys can click and it'll send you to the same post survey that we're referring to. But if you fill it out, you will be entered into a raffle for a $25 gift card. So we highly encourage you to, number one, give us feedback, and number two, get you an entry into that. So thank you.
Yeah. And during this time, I just wanted to say some special thank you, like Evelyn and Aisa, thank you so much, because they're helping us with Mi Casa, Tu Casa, for promoting this and asking the questions and creating the QRs. So thank you, girls. You've been doing an amazing job. Also, even for the high school counselors, I think I saw Lindsay that was here. Thank you so much for even high school counselors attending. I hope you found this beneficial. You could even fill out the survey as well, because it helps our nonprofit, because at the end of the year, these surveys are gonna help us to continue this, because we're doing this out of just to give back to the community. This is just something that we wanna do to help out the students that really need it, okay? So we're not getting paid for none of this. So thank you, Francisco, again, Aisa, Alejandra. It was really hard to get her, and thank you so much, because I know you have a lot of responsibilities. Hopefully she'll come back next year to help us out. Panchito, did you want to say anything, or Alejandra?
So Mi Casa Tu Casa is also an organization that provides pretty much information about scholarships and other type of grants available for scholars. So after you're done filling out the survey, we're gonna go ahead and share the platform as well. So please stay a little bit longer so we can provide you with that information.
I want to say to los parientes que estuvieron escuchando, disculpe que era puro inglés, pero cualquier pregunta que tengan sus hijos pueden preguntar. Más que nada, gracias por estar aquí y tomar el tiempo y el interés en sus hijos. Y cualquier cosa, nomás que pregunten en la escuela. Thank you all for being here and for letting me be a part of this. I really appreciate it as well. It was fun. I enjoy this.
Esta presentación también será mandada por correo electrónico. So this presentation will also is going to be sent out to you by email.
And just like I said, remember, these rules do change. So when they do get this by email, it's important that we say that, because rules do change. So let's say, for example, this is for the current year. 2-3 years from now, the rules could change. So you always want to go back to your financial aid department to ask them what has changed, what can I qualify for now? And I believe I even saw some out-of-state students. So I hope you found this very informative, because I know a lot of this is geared towards California. I'm not 100% sure how the Dreamers or AB 540 will help for out-of-state, but I hope that this presentation helps you to ask questions, to be inquisitive. Go to your financial aid department and ask them that, because I believe Alejandra said federal aid. So that helps for like the US, and then there's state aid. So you want to ask, do I qualify for the federal aid? Because FAFSA is for the whole US, correct?
Correct, correct. But every state should have some kind of funding. You know, just ask questions. If you ask around, you know, you'll be connected to the right person, to the right department that would qualify. You know, that would, you look for dreamers. It's really something that, at least in California, has gained a lot of traction. There's a lot of universities that have dreamer centers, or at least a club. So definitely ask. Don't be afraid to ask those questions, because this is money that you're entitled to. Like, it's put away for you. And here's another thing that I always like to tell my students is, don't think of it as you're asking them for money, because this is really something that you're entitled to. They're going to get there by saying the government that is putting away this money to help fund our education is going to get such a return on the investment that they're putting in. So it's to the government's best interest, it's to society's best interest to put in money to educate our youth, right? You know, I had stayed a teenage mom with a high school education, I would not have, you know, be paying the taxes that I pay now, right? I would not be able to give back to the community in so many ways. So don't think of it as a handout, right? Think of it as something that you're entitled to.
Yeah, and then just as a final closing, I know we have our information here on our Instagram. We are always promoting scholarships. I know a lot of people asked about that. If you get the Pell Grant, unfortunately, that's not going to end up covering everything. So I very much encourage continue applying for scholarships, whether you're a high school senior, whether you're a college undergrad. Throughout your entire undergrad experience, you can still find scholarships you can apply for. So definitely stay connected with us. And just thank you so much for all our amazing speakers and all our participants for asking amazing questions. And I hope everyone has a wonderful afternoon or night wherever you are at.
Yes, thank you so much. Again, Mi Casa Su Casa, thank you. For those who don't know, Mi Casa Su Casa essentially were the backbone of this webinar. They're the ones that sent out the emails, created the flyers, they were on top of it. So this workshop and this webinar couldn't happen without them. So please follow them on the social media platform. And again, thank you for your time. Thank you for filling out our survey. And if you didn't, please make sure to do so. So with that being said, that concludes our webinar. So thank you.